Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're zooming in on something pretty specific, really timely actually. You've got this great set of sources all about mastering multi-table play, especially on PokerBros. And the goal here is clear: boosting efficiency, growing that bankroll, particularly looking ahead to 2026. Now, this isn't just about, clicking buttons faster on more screens. We're really talking about building a whole system for peak performance. Multi-tabling, or MTTing, as some call it, its main draw is boosting your hourly rate, right? See more hands. But what the sources really stress, and I found this interesting, is the hidden benefit. The sheer volume forces you into super fast pattern recognition. It's like intense training for cutting out emotional mistakes and just tightening up your decisions.
Absolutely. That speed, that efficiency, it's everything. Because if you can handle making good decisions across, say, 4, 6, maybe even 8 tables, well, when you move up in stakes later, those big strategic calls feel simpler. The mechanics are just automatic by then. And the sources, they're quite clear. They lay out success based on 3 core areas. 3 pillars, you could say, that have to work together. You need the right technical setup, you need that strategic discipline, and you absolutely need mental resilience. If one of those fails, the whole thing, your win rate, it just collapses.
I like that framing. It really treats poker like a high-performance discipline, not just a casual game.
Right.
So let's start with that foundation then, the technical setup. The sources talk about an ideal workspace. What are the absolute must-haves physically for making sessions profitable instead of just frustrating?
Well, the physical side is fundamental, honestly, because when you're grinding high volume, fatigue is like the silent killer of your EV, your expected value, the most critical piece. Definitely the dual monitor setup. And look, it's not just about having more space. It's really about cognitive load. If you're constantly overlapping windows, clicking around, trying to find the table that needs action, that mental tax, it hammers your decision-making ability. You're guaranteed to miss things, crucial things.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So less about just seeing more and more about keeping your head clear, reducing that visual chaos. And tied into that, you mentioned physical well-being. Ergonomics. Why do the sources bother with things like chairs and wrist support? It seems basic.
Because these multi-tabling sessions, they have to be long, right? If you're uncomfortable, if you're in pain, your focus just tanks after the first hour or so. An ergonomic chair, proper wrist support, think of them as strategic investments. They directly extend how long you can maintain that high-quality focus. Without them, you might get, 60 minutes of peak play? Then you're either quitting early or, worse, playing tired and making bad calls.
Right, playing through fatigue, deadly.
And then, of course, there's the internet connection. If you're multi-tabling, any kind of interruption is just, catastrophic. You absolutely need stable, low-latency internet. Non-negotiable. Imagine a lag spike right when you have river decisions on 3 tables at once. It ruins the session. Could even damage your bankroll significantly.
Yeah, nightmare fuel for a grinder.
Okay,
so we've got the hardware sorted. How does PokerBros itself help us organize the software side? The sources mentioned tiling versus cascading tables.
All right, so PokerBros gives you options. Tiling is generally best if you're playing fewer tables, maybe 4 or less. It keeps every table fully visible, no overlap. You kind of treat each screen quadrant like its own little problem to solve. But if you're trying to run, say, 6 or 8 tables, maybe more, then cascading usually becomes necessary. It stacks the tables neatly, often just showing the one that needs action most prominently. With cascading, you have to rely more on visual cues, sound alerts. It maximizes screen real estate for pure volume.
And to really grease the wheels within that system, the sources just hammer home the importance of one specific efficiency hack: customizing hotkeys.
Oh, absolutely critical. Think of hotkeys like assigning fold, call, raise to specific keyboard buttons as automating the purely mechanical part of poker. You just can't afford to spend even a second hunting for the right button on screen when you've got 4 other tables with timers ticking down. By moving that execution part to muscle memory, you save all your brain power for the actual strategy. Reading the opponent, thinking about ranges, planning ahead.
That's a great way to put it, hotkeys, as cognitive offloaders. Okay, let's shift gears a bit to the tools that help in this high-volume world. A really crucial point seems to be about data gathering on PokerBros, specifically the restrictions on traditional heads-up displays, or HUDs.
Yes, and that is probably the single biggest defining constraint of playing on platforms like PokerBros. Those traditional HUDs, the ones that automatically collect stats and overlay them on your opponents in real time, they're restricted in pretty much all PokerBros clubs, and that forces a massive strategic shift. You simply can't lean on automated data support in the same way. It puts the onus back on your own observation, your pattern recognition, and importantly, manual note-taking.
So if you don't have that automated data feed, how do the serious players compensate? The sources mention some permitted tools that help track tendencies without breaking any rules.
Right. They focus on tools that manage the mechanical side of things and help with organization. First one mentioned is Table Tamer. It's custom software primarily for organizing your tables. But critically, it auto-focuses the window that needs immediate action. When you're spread thin across multiple screens, Table Tamer makes sure the right table pops up when needed, minimizes those wasted seconds searching, which can be costly.
Gotcha. And then there are the simpler, maybe lower tech aids,
Yeah.
like note apps.
Exactly. Simple note apps are mentioned for jotting down quick observations about players without cluttering your main screen view. You see a player make an unusual play, you quickly note it down. And for the deeper strategic work, equity calculators are key. But sources are very clear. Use these away from the tables between sessions for analyzing ranges, reviewing hands, planning, not during live play.
Okay, so the multi-tabling environment itself is about volume, observation, quick notes.
Precisely. You have to become the data collector yourself in real time, even if it's just quick mental notes or short typed ones. Table Tamer handles the mechanics, you handle the observation, then after the session, you take those notes, your exported hand histories, and that's when you run the complex math using the equity calculators. Study time is separate from grind time.
All right, this is where things get really interesting, I think. Let's talk about the strategic shifts the sources recommend, particularly looking towards 2026. There's this key idea about balancing volume and quality.
Yeah, this is a big one. Historically, you had a lot of grinders focusing heavily on rake back, just playing insane volume, tons of hands, mainly to get rake refunds, even if their actual win rate per table was pretty thin. What the sources suggest is that looking ahead to 2026, the games are likely to get tougher. Just grinding out hands purely for rake back might become, well, marginal at best. The focus has to shift. Your win rate per table, the quality of your decisions, that becomes the priority, even if it means dropping from, say, 8 tables down to 6, just to make sure you're playing your A game on each one. Quality over just raw quantity.
So maintaining that quality under pressure, that's the challenge. The sources give a couple of crucial in-game strategic hacks to help with that. The first one tackles that mental load directly, building pre-flop charts.
Yes, this is basically a direct counter strategy to decision fatigue, those awful misclicks. If you have solid, memorized opening ranges, 3-bet ranges for every single position, you essentially eliminate the need to calculate or think deeply in, like 90% of pre-flop spots. It lets you use your hotkeys instantly, confidently. It minimizes the mental energy spent on routine stuff, freeing up that brain power for the really complex post-flop decisions happening on your other tables. Think about it. If you hesitate for 5 seconds deciding whether to open raise, you might have just timed out on a huge rimmer call on another screen.
Efficiency again. And the second hack is about managing your time resource, using the time bank wisely.
Right. Most players, they just hit the time bank whenever they feel pressured, kind of haphazardly. The sources teach a much more disciplined approach. Conservation. You need to act immediately on routine plays, the easy folds, the standard calls, snap decisions. You save that precious time bank deliberately, specifically for the big moments, the high equity spots, the large pots, where you genuinely need that full 60 seconds or whatever it is to think through the opponent's line, figure out the odds, and make a really crucial bet or fold. Wasting time bank on an easy pre-flop fold means it won't be there when it really counts.
Makes sense. Don't burn it on the small stuff. So that's in-game. What about after the session? Discipline seems key there, too, with session reviews.
Absolutely. This is where those exported hand histories become gold. A high-volume player generates a ton of data, right? It can be overwhelming. The key, according to the sources, is tagging tricky spots while you're playing. Mark those hands where you used your time bank, or where you felt really unsure. Then, in your review, you prioritize analyzing those tagged hands using software like Equilab or Flopzilla. This focused approach helps you spot patterns of mistakes, your leaks across all those tables much faster, instead of getting lost reviewing every single minor pot you played.
Smart. Targeted review. Okay, let's move up a level to the advanced stuff. The sources mentioned a couple of 2026 hacks designed to really find that extra edge. First one was dynamic table selection.
Yeah, what's really interesting here is the idea that even when you're playing many tables, you shouldn't treat them all the same. Dynamic selection means you're actively scouting for and joining tables that show a higher VPIP that's voluntarily put in pot percentage. Basically, you're looking for the looser tables, the ones with more action, which generally means softer competition. By constantly aggressively trying to sit at the tables with weaker players, you significantly boost your overall expected value, your EV. You make sure your high volume is pointed at the most profitable spots available.
So actively hunting the fish, even while multi-tabling. Got it. The second advanced hack sounds quite high-tech, using AI-driven study tools, specifically AIO, artificial intelligence optimization.
Right, AIO comes into place specifically for that post-session review, especially with the massive amounts of data you generate multi-tabling. Think of it like machine learning applied to your hand histories. For a human to manually review thousands upon thousands of hands looking for subtle patterns is incredibly time-consuming, maybe impossible. AIU tools can ingest that huge data file and use algorithms to quickly flag statistical anomalies in your play or identify recurring tendencies in your opponents. It just massively speeds up finding your leaks and figuring out counter strategies. It's really about handling that high-volume data efficiently during study time.
Okay, that's definitely next level. The sources also briefly touched on something called search experience optimization, SXO. How does that fit into playing poker?
Yeah, that one's a bit different. It steps outside the direct mechanics of playing the game itself and more into the professional side of things, perhaps. SXO is about how you structure and share your results or insights, say, on a blog or a forum. Using things like FAQ schemas and structured data helps search engines understand your content better. So for a high-level player, maybe a coach, who wants to build a reputation or a brand, SXO helps them become more visible, establish credibility. It's more of a strategic move in the wider poker world, rather than something that helps you play your next hand better.
Okay. More about building your profile as a player. Understood. So we've covered the tech, the tools, the strategies, but let's face it, what did the sources say was the single biggest hurdle, the main challenge in multi-table play?
They were pretty much unanimous on this one. The absolute biggest challenge is maintaining consistent decision quality while juggling all that simultaneous action. Managing the screens, using the tools efficiently, that's important, but it's secondary to the sheer mental stamina needed to avoid making tired, costly errors across multiple tables at once. Your mind is the ultimate bottleneck.
Which brings us squarely to that final pillar you mentioned earlier, mental resilience. This sounds absolutely non-negotiable. What are the foundational habits, physical and mental, needed to sustain that focus?
Well, first off, structure is vital. The sources really emphasize taking short, regular breaks. Even just 5 or 10 minutes every single hour can make a huge difference in keeping your focus sharp. You have to consciously disengage for a bit. And things like hydration and good posture, which we touched on with ergonomics, they stop being minor details and become critical inputs for sustaining performance over long sessions. You have to actively manage them.
And mentally, any specific techniques?
Yes. They recommend having proactive strategies for resetting mid-session. Things like practicing mindfulness techniques could be as simple as a 5-minute breathing exercise when there's a lull in the action. It acts like a deliberate mental refresh, kind of like recharging your battery before the next wave of tough decisions hits.
Okay, so that brings it back to you, the listener. How do you actually prevent the burnout that seems almost inevitable with this kind of high-volume approach?
Yeah, I think it really boils down to respecting your own mental limits. Schedule those breaks religiously. Stay hydrated. And crucially, limit your sessions to manageable blocks where you know you can maintain high quality. One source suggested thinking in terms of, say, 90-minute intense blocks, followed by a guaranteed reset break, rather than trying to grind for 4 hours straight until your performance inevitably falls off a cliff.
So pulling it all together then, for maximizing that bankroll growth into 2026, it really rests on mastering those 3 pillars we talked about. First, the technical setup, getting those dual monitors, customizing hotkeys to take the load off your brain.
Second, that's strategic discipline. Really prioritizing win rate per table over just raw hands played. Using solid pre-flop charts to automate the easy stuff, and being super disciplined with conserving your time bank for when it really matters.
Right. And finally, that crucial mental resilience. Scheduling those breaks, staying hydrated, maybe using some mindfulness tricks to fight off the mental fatigue that high volume naturally brings.
Exactly. And if you're thinking about starting this or scaling up, just remember the path the sources recommend. Don't rush adding tables. Start with 2, maybe 4. Play until you can prove to yourself your win rate is staying positive and strong. Only when you're sure about the quality should you think about adding more volume. Quality first, then scale.
Okay, great advice. So here's a final thought for you to chew on as you maybe plan your own session reviews. If we agree the biggest challenge is keeping decision quality high across multiple tables, what single metric, something beyond just your win rate, could you track in your reviews to actually quantify when your mental stamina is starting to fade? Maybe it's tracking how often you misclick. Or perhaps monitoring the average time you spend on routine pre-flop folds. Does that time start creeping up, signaling that even simple actions are becoming mentally taxing? Something to think about.
Definitely something to consider. Apply this framework, commit to the structure, and yeah, turn that volume into real profit. Good luck out there growing that bankroll.